So for 1C notes, we are solving for the indicated variable. We call these literal equations because they are very common, like actual equations that we use in life. So here are some common formulas I just have listed. These are some things that we're going to be working with and rearranging. So if you would like to write the name of these, you can, but you don't have to know the name of these or memorize that or anything. So this first one here is the perimeter of a rectangle. This is the area of a triangle. This one is interest. And this one is distance. So the question I put here is, what if I know the left side but had a missing part? So by that, I mean, what if I knew like this side right here? What if I knew the perimeter, the area, the interest, the distance? But I didn't know something else. Maybe I know the distance and I know the rate, but I don't know the time. So how could I find that? By rearranging the formula. That's what we're going to be doing below. So if I know that I have 36 feet of fencing to make a garden, and I know the length has to be 8 feet, but I don't know the width. So how can I rewrite the equation so I am solving for W? So I'm going to take P equals 2L plus 2W. And I make this kind of a cursive L just so we can differentiate it from a 1. And I want to get W alone. This can be kind of confusing because we're working with just like letters, more letters than numbers. But I'm still trying to get that single variable alone. So it's still going to be kind of the same operations. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get that on one side by itself. So how can I get this 2L by itself? Or sorry, on the other side. I'm going to subtract it. So I'm going to subtract 2L from both sides so that I can have 2W by itself on this side. Now, I can't actually take P minus 2L because those are not able to be combined. So I'm just simply going to write P minus 2L. Now I'm almost there. I still need to get just that W alone, but that 2 is what's preventing me. So if this is 2 times W, again, doing the opposite operation, I'm going to divide by 2. So I'm left with only W now. So W is equal to P minus 2L all over 2. So now I could solve my problem. And I could have W equals, and I know my perimeter is 36, minus 2 times my length of 8 all over 2. And then I can just solve it. So 36 minus, and then 2 times 8 is 16 all over 2. And then I would just do 36 minus 16 to get 20. And 20 over 2 is 10. So that tells me right away I need 10 feet. Okay, so let's try another one that we have to rearrange. So here it's all letters. We have I equals PRT. This one is interest. It's interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. We will eventually use this in one of our units to find actual interest, but for now we're just going to use it to solve for P. So that means that I want to get P alone. So this is really like I equals P times R times T. So if I want to do the opposite, and I want P to be alone, I have to get rid of that R and that T. So I'm going to divide by RT on both sides. So I have I over RT is equal to P. All right, our next one wants us to solve for A. So this one, these kind of problems can be a little bit confusing because you don't want to start with distribution first. Because if we distributed this to both sides first, our A would be separated into two different things that we couldn't combine. So we don't want to do that. The first thing we want to do is work with getting this to be not a fraction anymore. So whenever we have a fraction, we multiply by the denominator or the reciprocal. So since this only has a number in the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 2. So I have 2d equals, and when I do that, these 2's are going to cancel. And I'm left with a times 2 minus b. And again, we're trying to get that a alone. So I want the a to stay there, and I want to get rid of the 2 minus b. So I'm trying to get rid of this whole thing here, this 2 minus b. And since it's currently being multiplied, I have to do the opposite. So I'm going to divide by 2 minus b. So then my final answer is 2d all over 2 minus b equals a. Okay, let's try another one here. So we have m over p minus q equals r, and we want to solve for p. So I'm trying to get this p by itself. So it's currently in the bottom of the fraction, and I need to get it out of the bottom of the fraction. So how do I undo a fraction? Multiply by the denominator or the reciprocal. I'm going to multiply by the denominator only here, because if I multiply by the reciprocal, I'm still going to have a fraction, and I'm going to have to undo that fraction again. So I'm just going to multiply by p minus q. And I'll put that in parentheses to make sure I know that it's staying together. So when I do that, these ones cancel out, and I'm left with only m over here. So m equals r times p minus q. Now this would be helpful if I wanted m alone, but I want to get p alone. So there's two things preventing me from doing that. I have the q and I have the r. But before I can deal with the q, I'm going to have to deal with the r. Remember, I don't want to distribute. Otherwise, I'm going to have an r attached to the p and the q. So instead, I'm just going to divide out the r to get rid of it. So then I'm going to have m over r is equal to p minus q. Now it's a lot easier for me to get the p alone because all I have left is that minus q there. And the opposite of minus q is plus q. So then I have m over r plus q is equal to p. I'm sure this is pretty confusing. It just needs a lot of practice. So keep practicing these. All right, now we're going to try a real world problem. So a worker at a framing store is making a frame. It's rectangular, and he knows that the perimeter is 144. So I'm going to highlight that. And the length is 40. So how can he determine the width of the frame? So one way we could do this is to rearrange the problem for W, but we kind of already did a similar thing up above here in rearranging the problem. So for this one, I'm going to show you another way. If they give you the numbers, you could just plug them in. So I have 144 for my perimeter, so I'm going to put 144 here, is equal to 2 times the length, and I know that my length is 40. And then plus 2w. So all I did was plug in the two numbers that I know. And now I'm going to work on solving. So I have 144 equals 80 plus 2w. Then I will subtract 80 from both sides. And I'm going to get 64 is equal to 2w. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. And I get that w is 32. So that is my width. I'm going to add inches on there since we are talking about a length. We're going to do the same kind of thing down here, but this time with the area of a triangle. So I have area equals 1/2 base times height. And it wants me to rewrite it in terms of h. So I'm going to do that first because that's what it's asking us to do. So I have the area equals 1/2 base times height, and I want to get h alone. So whenever it says in terms of, that just means getting that variable alone. So I'm going to start with getting rid of that fraction. So to get rid of the fraction, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So I have 2a is equal to bh. So when I do that, remember these cancel. And I'm still trying to get my h alone. So to get that alone, I have to get rid of my b. So I'm going to divide it out, and I get 2a over b is equal to h. Now it wants me to use this formula if I know that a is 18 and b is 9. So I'm going to have 2 times 18 all over 9 is equal to h. So if I do 2 times 18 first, I get 36. And if I divide that by 9, I get 4. So 4, and we're working in inches, is my height.